My name is Eric Meltzer, aka Mr. Eon, aka Dick Starbuck, porno detective. Just the early songs I had heard, I guess, Rapper's Delight, and some of the early, like very early Run DMC stuff. I had a couple like friends who were like getting into that, and Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, and so as those records were coming out, it was like kind of this new art form that was bubbling up, and it was just exciting because you would literally go to the record store and know every record that was there. There was only like 20 rap records, so like you would kind of see, you knew what everything was, and you knew when stuff was coming out. And well, I have one memory of being at camp, like a day camp, and this kid had something, and I guess he had a Walkman or something, and he like put it on me, and it was like Apache or Jump On It, or it was one of those like or Rapper's Delight, and I was just like, oh my God, what is this? Because the first record I had ever had was my dad bought, when I was 5, a movie called Saturday Night Fever came out, and although that's not like rap, it was more disco-y, but it kind of had like that 4/4, 100 beats per minute type thing. That was when I was 5 in '77, and then, just kind of being into that, getting up into like 79 or 80, whenever Rapper's Delight came out. Well, what we did was me and Milo were, we've known each other since we were, like 8 years old, and we kind of both had this liking for this music. And really April of '87, we had the Beastie Boys, Murphy's Law, and Public Enemy show, and it was the first time the Beastie Boys were really headlining, and Public Enemy was there, and it was really Public Enemy. We were like, oh my God, like what is this? And like they did My Uzi Weighs a Ton, and they did like stuff off their first album. But it's like walking into, it'd be like if you walked into Madison Square Garden and you all of a sudden heard something you'd never heard before, and it was at that volume, and there was 12,000 people there, and it was unbelievable. And then the Beastie Boys went on, who were a little bit more well known, but they were just coming up. The next day we went out and bought the Public Enemy #1 12-inch. And that was April, and then in late May, we went to school together as freshmen in '87. We performed like rapping over that beat and a couple other beats at a talent show. I didn't think I was going to be in a rap group at that point, but I thought that, at least like we had the balls to do it. And then we actually went to college in the same city, and then eventually BU together, and in '93, I guess, is when we met in some way Bobbito. Bobbito the Barber, aka DJ Cucumber Slice. And we met him, and he actually came to like the dorm that Milo was at, and remember Milo was like, yo man, you could have rhymed for Bobbito, and I was like, oh my God. And so like I did it, and I guess, it wasn't horrible. It was just part of growing up, and it was like we were just at the right place at the right time. We were just at a great place at a great time, But in '86, like Philadelphia was a very close to New York. And we had artists like Steady B and Cool C, and obviously the Fresh Prince and Jazzy Jeff. And then Philly was known that it had all the best DJs. You had like Miz and Cash Money and Jazzy Jeff. My whole rap career, I lived in New York though. Like in '94, after college, I lived in New York from '94 to '06. So my whole career really was representing Philly, but I lived in Manhattan. It was good to hear like when the Philly heads were coming up, and we did work with, Ill Advised, which was Mr. Lish and Baby Black and Rashid, and they were doing their thing too, and they were coming up too. And it was just like, that was like when everyone went underground and like didn't have their deals anymore with these big labels. It was like almost like you felt like you were a part of, like you were almost on par with like the Beatnuts or something. Like it wasn't supposed to be like that. Like we always looked at Organized Confusion and Beatnuts and Brand Nubian as like these, just like Big Daddy Kane and LL. And it was like then when the whole thing with like, you know, Hammer and then the West Coast takeover, like 91 and 93, that's when all the East Coast guys kind of went down underground. They weren't giving deals, you know, just to like Mace, and like that Puffy was coming up. And then when Biggie finally, you know, he came out like 94 or whatever, you know, then the East had kind of tried to match up. You know, well, my parents are both hippies, like hardcore hippies from New York, and like my mom was nuts, and she was like, oh, I'm fully supportive, like you should do it. And like she never thought it was weird. They never thought it was weird. You know, they never were like typical Jewish parents were like, you gotta be a lawyer, or you gotta be a doctor or a dentist. Like, it seems like when I was doing it, you know, it was always a hobby until we really put out a record. And then like, you know, I came to New York with a college degree, but I couldn't get like a regular job. And I worked in a coffee shop for 3 years or 2 years while we did our thing. And then there came to a point where I had a cheap, shitty place in Alphabet City, and I could afford to like just do it, you know, through hip hop. And that was just, you know, that was a blessing, you know, like not anyone can do it, and you have to ride it out as much as you can. And, you know, I wrote it out as an MC in my mind of what I could do and express as much as I could, you know. I was lucky just to have whatever I did have. And before, like, everyone was white and like rapping, it was like it wasn't like the norm, and it wasn't like, you know, there was still like a thing. I remember even in Boston when we were up there like trying to get on, and it was like an issue and different stuff like that. And like, you know, that was part of it early on. See, in my mind, I'm 41, I've been doing this in my mind since 86. So that's like, you know, more than 20 years. So early on it was like being white. The other one was just competing with like the dope lyricists of our generation. Like not talking about De La Soul and Q-Tip. I would never compare myself to any of those. I would compare myself to like LP and, you know, Ill Bill and, you know, Cage and heads like that. And I was all a fan of all that stuff while being in it. And it was also very surreal too, like to be in it. So I think it was kind of overcoming the fact that we really could do it. And like, I remember we would do songs, and like finally we gave them the Fat Beats, and this dude Rich King, who was at Fat Beats in like 94, like or 96, he like, you know, we finally made a record that we could put out. We finally did songs that we were like, wow, these are pretty good. Like maybe we could put these out. And that's, you know, 96 when It's All For You and Hands On, and, you know, we wanted to get some other heads on it. So like when LP came and, you know, like What for Hands On Experience, you know, it was like we wanted to have a couple known heads on there too, because we were like, who were we, you know? And we also eventually had that part of our formula was we never really had seen many MCs. You had your Big Daddy Kane and kind of KRS and LL who could carry a whole album. And, you know, I wanted to carry a whole album, but I also wanted to do stuff with other people. And it made me better, and it was challenging, and it, you know, you do a song and send something to someone, they do a verse, you'd be like, oh shit, I gotta do a dope verse. And like, I feel that I never would have been able to travel the world unless my hip hop career happened, and like, it's a blessing. Most people don't go anywhere in the United States. A lot of people don't go anywhere in the world, and I was able to go to Amsterdam 7 times, and Germany 10 times, and Paris, and, you know, perform in these places. It was just such a gift, you know, to be able to travel and like see everything. And so like that was, you know, what I got out of it most was this traveling and this like kind of sharing it, and how like Germany was 10 years behind. They were in 88 when it was 96, 97. They were still doing graffiti, and they were still doing, you know, they were breakdancing, and like how we embody that a little bit with B-Boy Document, and like, you know, we grew up in that. We knew Graph Heads. I know, you know, Peace to Espo and Mies and all the Philly heads who wrote NM, and like we knew those guys, like not real well, like they weren't my friends, but like we knew of them and knew they were doing their thing, and we knew DJs, and Milo became a DJ, and we knew these guys like John Schechter, who started The Source. He was in a group called BMOC, and he went to Harvard, and it was like, you know, these inspiring things that kind of said maybe we can do this too, you know. That I was in a Madden football game as a character, that we were able to do videos and be like, you know, on the air and prevalent, and like the fact that I still walk around Philadelphia today and, you know, heads like, not that many, but like, you know, some heads will recognize me and be like, yo man, I really like your stuff. Like I'm in real estate now, and like I had this one guy who was like, were you in the music business? And I'm like, yep. And like it's kind of like, you know, then you talk about it, and you know, with someone I was like, well, let me guess how old you are. You're like 30 to 33 years old, and in '99 you were 17 to 20 years old. And so it's always true, and it's like, you know, that's a really rewarding thing to be able to really have this body of work. And like, how many people have like a body of work that like anyone gives a shit about? And then, you know, I'm not saying we were the best or I was the best in any way, but I feel lucky that I was able to do what I did for whatever amount of time I did. And it was like a blessing. And it was like, it was more of like being a hip hop fan and being like, oh my God, like I get to make records. Like I didn't have such a big ego. I was like, oh my God, like it was like just a blessing to be able to do that, you know? I just want some, like, people to be like, he was true to himself. He wrote about porn and hip hop and sports and Star Wars, and, you know, I didn't really front, and I just, you know, whether you liked it or not, and the way I flowed, I always tried to do like a slow flow, offbeat type thing, like, you know, like Paris Smith would have, or like, you know, come behind the beat, and like, you know, that anyone even liked our stuff. I'm just like glad, and like the fact that people still remember it and still kind of feel it, and like, you know, I have people who I know that I've inspired, and to be that's pretty rewarding. No, I'm starting to write a little bit more. God help me. I have a 7-year-old named Lucas, and he keeps my time, and I have like a full real estate career that I like doing, but I'm, you know, it's still always in the back, and as long as Mighty Mai is there to kind of like edge me on, as he always had to during my career, thank God for him, maybe, you know, I'll do something, and, you know, I'm almost scared like that I'm not good anymore because it's been so long, but I think I'm pretty good in the shower these days. I'm getting better. I'll come back training, you know.